Let's get this party started. Okay, so welcome to the webinar from failure to fearless. Welcome everybody that is on the call. I'm probably going to wait another 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then I'm going to get started because I don't want to go too long. And it's probably going to be about 30 minutes. I'm going to touch on 3 of the basic points that took me in my life from failure to fearless. And there's some stuff that I've talked about before in the past, but I've been going through, I guess, a new rebirth of my life and my business. And so I kind of want to share the insight that I've gathered from that experience, which has given me a whole new brazen, bold outlook on how it feels to go from something that's considered a failure to actually being fearless in your life, love, and business. So I'm going to wait about 2 more minutes, and then I'm going to get started with the material, and we're going to get this party started. So give it about 2 more minutes, and we are going to delve into the bulk of the information. Welcome to the call. I'm so glad you've tuned in. I know it's late for some of you guys. I am actually recording from West Africa in Côte d'Ivoire, Abidjan. So it's about midnight for me, and depending on where you are in the world, it might be late or early or mid-afternoon. So welcome. Thank you for taking the time out to listen. I really appreciate it. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and get started. And like I said, it's not going to be a long call. I just want to get to the meat and potatoes of what we're going to be talking about today. And so let's go ahead and get started. So I titled my talk, well, actually I changed it because first of all, I like to do free webinars. Well, actually, first of all, before we really start, let's pray. So we can ground the call to make sure that everything comes together in divine and perfect order. God, thank you for giving me the wisdom, the knowledge, and the wherewithal, as well as the fearlessness to go through with this idea that you birthed within me. Thank you for making me faithful with the vision and being able to birth and carry out the vision. Thank you, God, for every single person that is within the sound of my voice. Thank you, God, for every single person that is on this call. God, I ask you to bless my mind, my body, and my spirit so that I may deliver this message so that it may be clear and concise and understandable to every single person who is within the sound of my voice and who also listens to the replays. Thank you, God, for inspiration. Thank you, God, for love. Thank you, God, for fellowship. Thank you, God, for wisdom. I bless every single person on this call. In Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. All right, so let's get started. So I first titled my talk, I titled it Fearless and Invincible in 3 Easy Steps. So I changed it because I kind of had an epiphany today. And it's weird. I'm learning as I get older to follow my spirit. And the more that I follow my spirit, I'm usually not led in the wrong direction. I'm usually led in the right direction. So tonight, as I was prepping for the call, something told me to change the title of the webinar from failure to fearless. And I think that it's something that a lot of people have experienced in their lives in general, in their love lives, in their business. And it's something that's been very personal to me in my life. And I really want to talk about it because I think that in today's society, when you fail, it's like the end of the world. It's not seen as a stepping stone. It's not seen as a learning tool. And for me, that's recently what I've started to discover. And it's weird because it's something that I've known but haven't really put into practice until this year and until recently. And it's something that I've wanted to share with people to let them understand that because you fail and because quote unquote bad things happen in your life means you're destined for failure. No, you're not. You have great potential that's within you that has to be birthed. And when you take those failures, those falling in the dust and getting your butt beat as just lessons on the path, they're just lessons. And hopefully if you learn your lessons the first, second, and third time, you don't have to keep repeating the class. So once again, I want to welcome everybody to the call. I'm so excited that you are here joining me. I want to start off with my story. And I always start off the calls and free webinars with my story because I think it's really, really important for you guys to understand who I am, where I come from, and how I ended up being the way that I am today. So if you don't already know, my name is Bibi Nyano. I am the CEO and owner of OMGILoveYourHair.com, which is also actually a limited liability company. So we are official and legal. I was actually born in the United States and spent 2.5 years there before I moved to West Africa. So my dad is from West Africa and my mom is African American. So we ended up moving back with my dad and spending 10 years of my childhood in Abidjan, which is the capital of Ivory Coast. And so we moved back. I grew up here and I pretty much had a normal childhood. I moved back to the States when I was 12. So I spent about 10 years in Africa. And when I got to the States, I felt different. I felt like I was out of place. And I just felt, not to say I felt bad about myself, because I had been raised to have high self-esteem, to be considered intelligent and beautiful. But I think that when I moved to the States, number one, the standards of beauty were different and things were just different. So I kind of started to shrink. I started to shrink my light and I started to try and hide my light because I didn't want to be different. I just wanted to be like everyone else and I wanted to blend in. And one of the ways that I was able to do that was with my hair. I started straightening my hair, I think when I was 12, as soon as I moved back and my mom would allow me to straighten my hair because it allowed me not to stand out with natural, quote unquote, nappy hair that was undesirable. So that was the first time where I kind of felt different and I felt like I didn't fit in. And so life continued on. I had a normal teenagehood, went to high school, did well, got into college, and things didn't really start to change until I got my first wake-up call, which didn't come early for me. I'd say it came late because it was when I was in my mid-20s to late 20s, almost into my 30s, where I got my first real wake-up call is when I ended up failing the bar. And for me, that was a huge failure in my life. And it was the culmination of so many years sacrifice, or so I thought, with school and studying and being in the library and not having fun. And when I failed that, I couldn't see it back then, but now I thank God for that closed door. And so this is going to kind of introduce my next point, but I'll finish my story. So after I failed the bar, I kind of went into a quiet zone and a quiet space. And what ended up being the turning point was when a friend of mine sent me a text message saying that I should apply for this grant. And she told me the name of the grant, which was a Fulbright Fellowship, which is a very exclusive, amazing program that allows you to go abroad, research, and work in foreign ministries. In this case, I was going to be studying public policy, or that's what I planned to be. So I applied for it, and this is to tell you where the negative thoughts came in. So I just failed the bar. I wasn't feeling too good about myself, especially in the realm of education. And I was like, me apply for a Fulbright. I could never be a Fulbright. I mean, amazing, intelligent people like, I don't know, Mahatma Gandhi would get Fulbrights or Hillary Clinton's. And what's so interesting for me that relates to this talk about failure to fearlessness is that from a failure, I went into fearless mode. I applied anyway. And I said, the worst that they can say is no, which is true for any aspect of your life. The worst that can happen to you is that you get embarrassed in front of other people or that someone tells you no. Unless it's going to kill you, it will probably be okay. So I applied for the Fulbright Fellowship, and it was a 6-month wait while I was working full time. And I remember at the end when I was notified that I got accepted, it was as though the failure that I experienced from failing the bar meant nothing. It was as though I felt to a certain extent validated. And when I got that fellowship, it was like, okay, when you're fearless, you get rewarded. So that was one of my first lessons from failure to fearlessness. And I moved back to the Ivory Coast after 16 years. It was a very big culture shock. And I remember my life to a certain extent blossoming again because I felt that I had been in the valley for a year after I'd gotten my results and they weren't the results that I expected. And I felt as though my life blossomed when I moved back. I ended up delving full fledged into my blog, OMG, I Love Your Hair, where I talked about everything in my life from healing from failures to natural hair to cleansing my body to losing 10 pounds using green juice, and just using it as a platform to inspire and to motivate and to discuss with people about life. It was really a blog that I started as a lifestyle blog to just talk about life and how to do better and how to empower yourself so you just don't end up bitter and dejected, because that's really not sexy. And I was reminded of a quote today that I read on Instagram from a girl that I follow, and she reminded me that every day we're dying. Every single day we're dying. Some of our cells are dying and we're getting older. As you get older, you're dying. And so it really put things into perspective for me as I was getting ready for this call, because it talks about from failure to fearlessness. So what that means to me is that every day I'm dying, I might as well just do what I want to do and be fearless in it instead of wait, because before you know it, you'll wake up and your life will be over and you'll be full of regret. And that's not what we want. So I ended up doing my Fulbright Fellowship. I delved into my blog. I got invited to do workshops in another country on skin bleaching and hair straightening and the negative effects. I started filming a documentary on natural beauty, natural hair in Abidjan. And I also started my own natural hair care product. So these are examples to tell you that I know failure. And I haven't mentioned some other examples of failure from my life, but I'll delve more into that as we go into the steps. So that's a little bit about my story. That's how I came to be who I am today. And it gives you a little bit of insight into who I am and what I do. So let's get started with step number one. So in order for you to go from failure to fearlessness, sorry, I talk really fast. So in order for you to go from failure to fearlessness, the first step that you have to do is get quiet and get clear. I call it quiet clarity. So the first step is to get quiet and to get clear. Quiet clarity. So for me, in order to go from failure to fearlessness, you have to get quiet. In order for you to really hear, in my opinion, what your spirit and your soul is telling you and what God is trying to get across to you through that failure, you have to turn the noise off. You have to turn the noise off in your head, all the voices that are telling you you're not good enough, you failed, so why even try again? I even had that voice tell me that multiple times when I had failed. For example, I just use examples from law school because that was such a big dream of mine. In order for me to apply to law school and get accepted, I had to take an entrance exam, which I got pretty much, if it was on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being passing, I probably got a 1. And that's not something that I share a lot with people unless it's to build them up. Because to me, that was so big. I remember getting my score, and that was prior to me getting into law school, prior to everything. I remember getting my score and crying because I remember I put in the work, I'd studied, I'd done everything I was supposed to. I had taken a course, which I had paid $1,000 for. I had sacrificed the time going to class when I was working a full-time job at a law firm. And I remember getting that score and feeling like such a failure, like I could have done something better and it was all my fault. And I remember that moment when I looked at my score and I went into a quiet space and I asked God, what should I do? And I got really quiet so I could get some clarity on what the next move would be. I feel as though sometimes when we've had a really huge failure in our life, we tend to go ask our mom, our dad, 50,000 million people what we should do next. In actuality, you have to get quiet with yourself so that God can speak to you. Because I'm a huge firm believer that everything in the universe is connected and held in balance. So in order for you to receive that word, it's going to come in the quiet. It's going to come as a whisper. In order for you to turn that failure into something fearless, you have to get quiet. And that also means fasting from relationships and people that cause you to slump and feel bad. Even if it's family members, I've had that experience. I was having a conversation with my dad the other day where I told him that some family members had to go on timeout. And it wasn't anything personal against them, but I was starting to notice that every single time I hung out with them or we had a conversation, I just felt drained. And I felt as though my energy was just at an all-time low. And I'm usually a very energetic, happy-go-lucky person. And so I started to notice that everyone carries energy with them, every single person. And so when you're talking about going from failure to fearlessness and you're getting quiet and gaining clarity, not only do you have to turn down the noise around you and in your head and all the voices, you also have to get clear on what relationships are for you and what relationships are against you. And sometimes it doesn't mean that that relationship or that person or that friend is the enemy, not necessarily. It just means that they're not going where you're going, or they're not necessarily tuned into that same energy frequency. So if you're not tuned into the same energy frequency, you're going to get a lot of static. So you have to remove those relationships as you are gaining clarity and getting quiet. Because when you are in a vulnerable state after this failure that you've experienced in your life, you cannot have a lot of strong negative energy around you. It will drain your spirit and will not allow you to hear God's voice. So a lot of that also has to do with turning off the TV. It's funny because friends of mine want to come visit and are like, oh, well, what are we going to watch on TV? And I'm like, I don't have a TV. They're like, excuse me? That's just a personal choice. I have my laptop so I can pick and choose what shows I watch, because I've noticed that if you're not careful, a lot of the things that we ingest through social media, through the TV, through the radio, can tend to pull our energy down. So that's also another step under the get quiet, get clear, quiet clarity. Not only do you have to turn the noise down and get rid of the relationships that drain you and suck the life out of you, you also have to turn off the TV and the radio or anything that's a distraction and get in a quiet space and ask and look for the signs. So I'll give you guys a really good example, because this is what I know. This is how I felt after my failure and before I felt anything like fearless. I remember getting my bar results and I remember disappearing. I cut my phone off. I barely told my mom and dad that I hadn't passed. I barely told my boyfriend, and I disappeared. And I remember I went into seclusion, what I call valley time. I went into the valley time for probably about, I'd say 6 to 7 months. And I didn't really answer the phone for anybody. I only talked to the inner circle for me, which are my best friends and my parents, and at the time, my boyfriend, who truly loved me unconditionally, no matter what titles were attached to my name. And I got quiet and I reconnected to my spirit. That's why it's so essential when you've had a huge disappointment or a failure in your life to disconnect. And not to necessarily disconnect from people that love you. You pick and choose who's going to be there and support you, but you have to disconnect from almost everything so that you can get quiet and that you can get back to your center. Because when you've had something huge or a failure happen, it's as though you're unbalanced and you're disconnected. I no longer listen to booty shaking music. I was listening to Joel Osteen, who's a motivational pastor. No one had access to me unless I wanted to talk to them. And during that 6 to 7 month period, it was really hard in the beginning, but I asked myself what actually made me happy. I literally asked myself what made me happy. Did I don't know, making a kale salad make me happy and taking it to work? Then taking a walk around the neighborhood just to get some fresh air, or even taking a 5-minute break at work. What made BB happy ultimately? What had I pushed down so deeply inside of me that I was no longer experiencing that failure of failing the bar was able to break me? So I had to get back to the center and get quiet and ask myself, what was truly making me happy? So the first assignment that I'm going to give you guys with quiet clarity is to assign you a 21-day hush your mouth fast. And that's exactly what it sounds like. For 21 days, you are going to hush your mouth on any negative talk, any negative audio, no complaining, no gossip, no lying. And this exercise is really, really difficult, but it's really powerful. I've been able to only do it once since I've tried it, because what ends up happening is that you make a pact with yourself. You get a calendar, you post it on your refrigerator, your mirror in the bathroom, as well as if you have one in your bedroom. And every single day you get up with the intent of not complaining, not gossiping, not lying, not saying anything negative. And probably for the first week, you have nothing to say, because if you start to take inventory of your mouth, you notice that we complain a lot. Someone says, for example, today, I was in an environment where I guess a lot of people were getting sick and a lot of people were tired, and everybody kept saying, oh my God, I'm so tired. Oh my God, I'm so tired. And I had to catch myself, because I was going to go, well, I'm so tired too. Man, it's been a long week. I shut my mouth and I hushed, and I didn't participate in the complaining and the groaning, because ultimately it does nothing for you unless you're going to do something about it, which takes me to Maya Angelou's quote where she talks about, if you're complaining, stop or do something about it. So I want you guys, for your first assignment for step 1 on quiet clarity, is to do the 21-day hush your mouth fast. That means no gossiping, no complaining, no negative talk. That's for self and with other people. No listening to negative talk. Because what I've noticed when I've done the exercise and been able to do it all the way through is that it's truly powerful and that it helps you transcend. And when I say transcend, that means things can happen in your life, good or bad, but they don't affect you. You keep moving. And sometimes in our lives, when we have quote unquote bad things happen or failures happen, it stops us dead in our track. We lay down on the ground, we give up, we're like, oh my God, woe is me, I'm not going to do it anymore. But when you start to practice the 21-day hush your mouth fast, you start to understand the power that your words have. Everything that we say is sent out into the universe and comes back to us clothed, and we're so surprised and so confused about why either this person or the situation is showing up in front of us. We spoke it. Everything that you have ever experienced in your life, you've spoken into existence. Think about that. And it's kind of scary to think about, but it also tells you about how much power you have and how much power you have to create your life and to recreate and to heal your life. So I want to challenge you guys for step number 1 is to do your 21-day hush your mouth fast. Maybe you want to start tomorrow. Maybe you want to do a week. But the reason why I picked 21 is because research has shown that it takes 21 days for you to take up a new habit. So that's going to be your first assignment. So let's keep right on moving. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the chat box. So I'll give you guys a second. Let me know if you have any questions in the chat box, and we will move on to step number 2. No questions, no comments. Hope you guys are listening and enjoying. So we'll move on to step number 2. Step number 2, to go from failure to fearlessness, is to do your healing work. And it sounds really simple, and maybe it sounds really new agey and all the crystals and unicorns, but what I mean when I talk about healing work is to acknowledge that something is wrong. Let's say, for example, probably about 6 months ago, I had gained about 10 to 15 pounds. And everybody kept making a comment about it. Oh my God, like, oh, you look great, or whoo, you done put on some weight. What's going on? Like, you eating good? And so I recognized that I had put on some weight because my clothes no longer fit. So I had to acknowledge with myself what had caused the excess weight gain. Was it unforgiveness that I was harboring towards an ex-boyfriend? Was it not feeling good about myself and not understanding my worth and putting myself into situations that were detrimental not only to my physical well-being, but also to my emotional well-being? Step 2 is to do the healing work, because if you do not do the healing work, it's as though you're putting a Band-Aid. All these webinars, all these classes you're listening to are good and great, but unless you actually do your healing work, it's as though you're putting a Band-Aid on a wound that is already healed. And so what I mean when I say on a hemorrhage. It's going to keep hemorrhaging and it's going to bust open. So when I talk about healing work, what do I mean? Because you're like, okay, BB, that's all great. Step 2, going from failure to fearlessness. I need to do my healing work and I need to acknowledge what's wrong. Okay. So when I talk about healing work, I talk about personally something that I talk about all the time because it's something that I've practiced since I was a little girl but didn't know what it was called. Self-development. The number one thing that has changed my life and that has been the hardest lesson to learn, I kid you not, even today, is to understand that I am responsible for my life and I am responsible for my own happiness. That has been the most important thing up to date that has allowed me to step out of failure into fearlessness, is to understand the power that I possess, that I have only one life, and that I am responsible for my happiness and the choices that I make and how I respond and react to the world and the people around me. So for me, I read a lot of self-development blogs. I read a lot of authors that talk about self-development and self-help because I feel as though a lot of times when we've had a failure in our life, it pushes us into victimhood. Like you crawl into the corner, into the fetal position, and you're like, oh my God, I tried my hardest. Why did this happen to me? It's not fair. Woe is me. The world is horrible. But when you start to practice self-development, you start to kind of change your attitude. And I'm going to warn you guys, I curse, and that's just a part of my brand. Bad shit happens. But ultimately, what are you going to do about it? I remember being, and this is to give you guys an example about bad shit happening. What are you going to do about it? I remember being a kid and moving back to the States. And what I noticed at 12, 13, 14 is that adults look miserable. They literally looked sad and miserable and dejected, and I didn't understand why. I had been blessed to have an amazing childhood and parents that loved me, so I didn't understand that. And it wasn't until, I'd say maybe about 3 years ago that I started to realize why. I started to realize the stresses that can affect and the circumstances that can affect someone. And so that's when I started to really get heavily into self-development, because I didn't want to look all wrinkled and dejected and bitter and sad, because I thought God gave me this life. I mean, the circumstances are not perfect. Everything isn't perfect, but I am the one that decides my attitude every single day that I wake up. So I'm going to have to get some reinforcement, just like medication that you take every day when you're sick, to make you better. And so since I don't want to drink or become an alcoholic, and I don't want to be on medication to pep me up, I'm going to have to find an alternative. And that alternative for me to do my healing work with self-development books. So that's the first step under doing your healing work. The second one that I also recently started to really delve into is self-love. And we hear a lot about self-love, and this is just from a personal experience. I've always had very high self-esteem since I've been a kid, but I think that the circumstances of life and the experiences of relationships and just living can take a toll on your body and your spirit when you go out every day into the world and you are told that you are not enough. You are told that your worth is not enough, and every single thing that's coming at you is just to make you better, as though you created just as you are, perfectly, with no flaws. And so I had to delve back into self-love and learning what that meant, and had to actually understand that because I failed, I was not a failure. I'm not sure if you guys understand that, but that's something I really had to wrap my mind around, because when I failed the bar, when I didn't get into law school on the first try and was waitlisted, when I didn't even get to into college and I was waitlisted, all of those things that are added onto the list of your self-worth, how you see yourself, how you show up in the world, how I felt about myself was affected. So I had to go in and do some deep healing work on the self-love portion of myself. And I had to come to the conclusion that whether I succeeded or failed, I was still enough. Ultimately, whether I succeeded or whether I failed, I, BB, was enough just the way that I am. And I think that's a really important point to make as we talk about going from failure to fearlessness. Whether you've had something bad happen in your life, you are perfect, whole, and complete just the way you are. As you move down the path to getting back to your fearless state, that's fine. But never forget, just as you are, there is nothing wrong with you. You're just going through an experience, and that's all it is. And we're the ones that choose to label experiences as good or bad. Depending on how you react to them and what you do with them is whether or not they will be good and bad. So self-love is something that I started to do through forgiveness work and mirror work. And some of this stuff might sound kooky to you, that's fine. But ultimately, I want to heal and I want to feel good about myself and I want to feel good about my life and where I'm going and what I'm doing and the people that are in my life. So I was open to trying new things. And I think that when you're on the path from going from failure to fearlessness, that means you failed. So therefore, you need to try something new. To become fearless, you're willing to try methods that speak to your spirit. What spoke to me and I knew that I had to do, which I did not want to do, and you guys can hear it through gritted teeth, was the forgiveness work. I didn't want to do the forgiveness work. I hold grudges very well. I am probably about, I'd say 80 to 85% on my way to letting go of grudges and really coming into my own in terms of forgiveness work. So I'm sure that you guys hear a lot about forgiveness word, and I call it the F word because for me, that's how strong of a word it is. I call it the F word. And so I started to look into forgiveness when bitter seeds were planted in my heart and in my life. And that's no lie. I think that we look for relief when bad shit has happened. And so the relief that I was looking for was from a relationship. I had a really, really negative, bad relationship happen situation coupled with time in law school that wasn't going so well, that was stressful. And so after it was done, I felt really bitter. And I promised myself that that was not the kind of woman that I was going to become. And that was not the kind of woman that I wanted to be. And ultimately, I wanted to prove not only to myself, but to the people that had hurt me that I could always come out on top. And so if that meant that I had to do my forgiveness work, then that's what it meant. Because being a bag lady is not sexy. You have to put all those bags down because they're tripping you as you're trying to move on to your road to fearlessness. So the way that I do forgiveness work is, which is really hard, but it gets easier as you do it. It's kind of like when you haven't exercised for a year and you try to go out there and jog a mile, you want to collapse and you're like breathing and coughing up your lungs. That's how I describe forgiveness. It's really hard in the beginning, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. So I'll give you guys an example of how I use forgiveness to heal, to do my healing work with the relationship that I had. So the way that I started was, I would say the person's name. So let's pick this ex-boyfriend's name. I'll make it up. Frankie. I bless you, Frankie, and I forgive you, Frankie. I forgive you for not being who I wanted you to be. I forgive you and I set you free. I bless you, Frankie. I forgive you, Frankie. I forgive you for not being who I wanted you to be. I forgive you and I set you free. So that was the first statement that I would say over and over and over and over and over and over and over until it stuck. I would say it in the shower. I would say it sitting on the toilet. I would say it driving to work. I would say it before I would go to bed. I would write it out. And then what I started to continue to do was I started to bless that person with all the things that I wanted to see show up in my life. So, for example, I bless you, Frankie, with an amazing job. I bless you with prosperity. I bless you with good health. I bless you, Frankie, with travel. I bless you with being debt-free. I bless you with an amazing family. I bless you with children. I bless your wife. I bless every single good thing that comes into your life. I bless you. I bless you. I bless you. And when I tell you the words stuck in my mouth when I first started saying it, I still kept going because ultimately I wanted to get away from being mad and angry and bitter and why did this person do this to me? And there was a lot of blame. So that's how I did my forgiveness work. And truthfully, it took me a year. It took me a year to completely forgive, release, and let that situation go, to the point where if I saw the person or if the person called me, it wouldn't bother me to talk to them. Of course, I wouldn't entertain a relationship with the person because that's not something that I would want to bring into my life. but I was at the point where we could have a decent conversation and it would be fine. And so I also like to share the rewards that come from doing your healing self-love work. So I did that for a year and finally was able to release that burden and let it go. And I was minding my own merry business. And I remember it was homecoming weekend at my law school and I got a call from this person. And it almost makes me tear up because it shows you the power of release and forgiveness and stepping outside of yourself to heal yourself. I got a call from this person apologizing for every single thing. Mind you, I hadn't had contact with this person in a year. They apologized for every single thing that I had been hurt about, that I had let go, that I had forgiven, that I had bound and spoken and released and felt free about. So when I actually talked to the person, I really felt free. I was like, well, what's wrong? Well, okay, well, thank you. I really appreciate your call. Be blessed. Like, have an amazing weekend. And got off the call and went to make dinner because before I went to make dinner, I kind of sat there and I thanked God because it was a really powerful moment in my life where it proved to me this stuff works. And the thing is, you also have to remind yourself that in this fast popcorn society and social media, statuses pop up, you post pictures, you get likes instantly. Healing work takes time. Healing work takes the time and the consistency to actually do it. It's like a lifestyle change. You want to lose 50 pounds, you have to have that apple in that smoothie every single day consistently. It's the same thing. It's as though you take forgiveness shots every single day. So the next thing that I do that goes under my self-love, the first one is self-development through books that inspire, encourage, and empower me. The second one is the forgiveness work where I do my affirmations every single day and I'll repeat it for you guys and I'll send out a follow-up email. But it's, I bless you, say the person's name. I forgive you, say the person's name. I forgive you for not being who I wanted you to be. I forgive you and I set you free. I forgive you for not being who I wanted you to be. I forgive you and I set you free. And then after you've mastered that, you can start blessing them with all the things you'd want for someone to bless you with and pray for you with. And so lastly, under my self-love toolkit is I do mirror work. And this is going to sound crazy and off the wall, and that's fine. But this is something that's worked for me, that has taken me from failure to fearlessness, where today I feel so pumped up. I feel so full and fearless that I want to share this message with people because it's something that's really helped me. So this is a really simple exercise. And I actually keep a mirror, a small mirror by my bed and a small mirror in my purse. And I have a big mirror in my living room as well as in my bedroom. And so I go to the mirror and every single day when I wake up, I say, BB, I love you. I really, really love you. BB, I love you. I love and approve of you. Those are the two sentences that I say to myself every day without failure. And when I said them in the beginning, I cried because I had not been approving of myself, especially when I had failed so many times with so many things that I wanted to try. And I didn't really act or treat myself as though I loved myself. So that for me was the first breakdown before the breakthrough, because when I was able to start doing my mirror work and looking into my eyes, which is a really intimate act to do without running away, you start to come face to face with that inner child that's looking at you like, you know, you're not treating me with love, and you know you're not taking care of me, and you haven't been approving of me. And so that's something that I started to do on the regular, and it got easier and it got easier, and I was able to start dealing with a lot of that mental gunk. And then I started saying things as, oh my God, you are gorgeous, you are beautiful, you are intelligent. Every single positive, good affirmation that I say out loud or that I write, I say it to myself in my eyes, looking at myself, because I don't know how to describe it, but it boosts you. It gives you a shield and armor before you go out into the world that may tell you something different. Because when you've pumped yourself up so much, it's hard for you to get deflated. So that is the last and final tool that I use under my self-love, under doing your healing work. In order for you to move from failure to fearlessness, you have to do your healing work. So we're going to move on to the last step, which is going to be very short and sweet, which is take action. And If you guys are taking notes, step 3 is take action. Done is better than perfect. So I'm going to repeat that because I think it's powerful, and it was powerful for me when I read it. Done is better than perfect. A lot of times it's fear that stops us. Fear makes you think, oh, well, I shouldn't post this blog post. Well, it's not spelled correctly and the wording is all wrong. And what about the grammar? Well, what are people going to think? I have a rule that I've created this year, because this year is a year of being fearless for me, is the 5-minute rule. I give myself 5 minutes to have all the voices come in, and I press send, enter, I do it, I take action. Because to me, as long as you've done that thing and beat procrastination, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can always go back and fix it, because a lot of times when we've had a failure happen in our lives, it's as though, oh, I've already tried this. Why am I going to try it again? Or wait, well, maybe I need to change this, but no, I need to get some confirmation from other people. No. In your hearts of hearts and in your spirit, you know exactly what's right. You can hear that tiny, small voice. So I want you guys to take into account that 5-minute rule. Whatever it is that you want to do, let's say an idea pops into your head. I was walking home the other day from work, sweating in the hot sun, and an idea came to me, and it was like, you should do a webinar. You should do it on being fearless and being invincible, because that's how you feel right now. How did you get there? You should explain it to people and try to teach it so that people can feel that way too. And I said, okay, that sounds good. And so mind you, I was walking, and I was kind of maybe about 20 minutes from my house. So as soon as I got home, I went online, signed it up, put it on Facebook, didn't even think about it. That's my 5-minute rule in terms of taking action, because to me, I can always change it later. Because sometimes we cripple ourselves with saying, oh, well, I'll start tomorrow. Well, I have to get this and this and this done. No, do it now. Because the more you wait, the less likely you are to do it. And that's the truth. That's how fear is able to, I guess, take hold of you. Because when the opposite of being fearless is being fearful. So fearless is meaning you have no fear. There's less fear within you. Being fearful means being full of fear. So a lot of times, I think personally, I'd say 98 to 99% of the things that we wait to do are based on fear. We're scared that something's going to happen. Either someone's not going to like it, or we're not sure it's going to make us look good. I think that I've gotten to the point in my life where I don't give two flying hooties about what anybody thinks, besides maybe my parents a little bit, because I love and respect them and they raised me and I wouldn't want to embarrass them. But ultimately, what I want you guys to hopefully get from this call, if you haven't already, is that number one, you're dying every day, so why not do it? As long as you're not hurting anybody intentionally. And number two, live your life fully, boldly, fearlessly, because you don't want to wake up tomorrow and have any regrets. So step 3 is take action. Done is better than perfect. Practice the 5-minute rule. So right now on this call, if you're taking notes, I want you to write down one thing that you have been putting off since for freaking ever. One thing. Do not encumber your brain with your 50 million to-do list. Write down one thing that you have been putting off since forever from doing. For example, maybe it's washing the dishes that are in your kitchen, or maybe it's putting the books away that have been laying on the sofa since last week. I want you to get up and get one aspect of that started. So for example, if you haven't done the dishes in a week, I want you to get up right now on this call, fill the sink with water and dish detergent, and just let it sink. Let it soak. You don't even have to start washing the dishes. Or let's say you were supposed to call the publicist for the book idea that you had. Open the email, type the name in, draft a short little sweet email, and save it as a draft. What's another example I can give you guys from my life? So I tithe. So I've been putting off tithing to where I receive my spiritual nourishment for about a week. And I know I should have been doing it because I've been really, really blessed this past week. And so what I did is I got out all the envelopes, I got out my checkbook, my stamps, and I put it in my purse. No excuses. So I actually did it this morning. I wrote out all my tithe checks and all my notes. And since I had my envelopes, my stamps, and checkbook, I did everything in one go. So prep. So I'm going to give you guys about 2 minutes to get whatever that thing is started. That one thing that you've been procrastinating on, do it, get it started now. So I'm going to time it for 2 minutes and come back in 2 minutes and take a glass of water. Okay, just in case you guys think I'm not on, I'm still on. I'm going to give you guys a chance. And even if you still don't do it, I want you to write it down. The thing that you've been procrastinating and putting off for such a long time. I can give you another example. I was actually facilitating a group activity that I was supposed to be doing, and it took me a week to complete the last module. And I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, BB, you talk about going from fearless to fearlessness, and you can't even get this thing together. And the first thing that I stopped doing was stop talking to myself in a negative way, and loved on myself, and got in the mirror and told myself all the big things that I wanted to do, and bigged myself up and loved on myself. And after that, I just focused on that one thing. That's why I think it's super important for you guys to write it down now. That one thing that you've been putting off that you can take one step towards doing. If it's clearing off the counter in your bathroom, if it is putting the trash outside so you can take it out when you leave in the morning, whatever it is. So I want you guys to do that. So we're gonna go ahead and close now, because we've almost gone an hour, and I wanted to make it 30 minutes, but like I felt like the spirit was leading me, so I had to keep going, and I was so inspired and like geeked up, and it's almost 1 a.m. here. But this stuff is really fascinating for me, because I really truly believe that we were put on earth to thrive. We were not put on earth to suffer, to be sad, to be depressed, dejected. Not saying that any of those things are bad things, because it leads us to our fullest potential. A failure was one of the biggest blessings in my life. And another thing that I want you guys to take away from this call is that something that was supposed to destroy you can be the reason you rebirth. It can be your biggest blessing. The main reason I ended up back in the country that raised me, back in Africa, is because I had one of the biggest disappointments of my life. I will never forget it. It was not fun. But I also recognize that I shouldn't fight God for my closed doors, because ultimately I do not have the whole picture. I only have bits and pieces and glimpses of what an amazing life I was put here to lead. And God has the entire roadmap and the entire plan. So I have to sit back and trust, and so do you. But in that trust, there's an African proverb that says, pray and then move your feet. So I think that's an appropriate quote to close on in terms of taking action. Pray and then move your feet. In order for you to go from failure to fearlessness, you have to love on yourself. You have to see failure as a stepping stone to your next fearless self. So with that, I'm going to close, and let me know if you guys have any questions, any comments. I also wanted to share, I'm probably going to do another version of this free webinar next week. I haven't decided when, so if you'd like to come back, join. I'm also going to be sharing with you guys my new guide. It's going to be a lot of the stuff that I shared tonight, but it's going to be in written form. So make sure to look out for that. So I'm looking at some of the comments. Yes, these are really good. That's something that I have to do on a daily, which is clear out useless paper and just kind of let it go, because it also encumbers you and takes up a lot of energy in your house. One of the big ones for me is doing laundry. And I vowed to myself this week that was it, because I could see the laundry taking up space in the corner, and it's energy that's being taken up. So yeah, so you guys tune in for that. I'm also premiering on June 1st. You guys get first dibs. My private coaching program, which is called 90 Days to Fearless. And it's a private 3-month coaching where I go in depth with you guys on all these ideas, because something that I also didn't share on how you go from failure to fearlessness is accountability. You can jump up and down, say, I'm going to do it by myself, and we are powerful by ourselves, but sometimes you need accountability, you need a coach. And so since that's something that I kind of have experience in, and I've been doing it for about 2 years with other young women. And I think it'd be really interesting if you guys wanted to continue to work together. So you can get more information about that if you go to my website at www.omgiloveyourhair.com. And if you click under coaching, you can fill out the questionnaire and you can set up a time to talk. For 30 minutes, it's free and you'll get a whole plan. It'll be amazing. So unless you guys have any questions or any comments, I'm so glad you guys joined the call tonight. It was good energy, amazing energy. Thank you for trusting me with your time. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope that you guys are blessed. And wherever you guys are in the world, have a good morning, afternoon, or evening. And stay in touch via Facebook. You can also send me a private message through my blog, through contact. And I love you guys. Have a great, great evening, morning, or afternoon. Bye.